How divided are we as a nation? And what exactly does that division look like? As we talked about previously, somewhere around 80% of Americans, that's 8 in 10, almost all of us, believe that the United States has a divided public. If you're anything like me, that number hits you right in the gut. 80%, probably worse now, that data was collected in 2024. 80%, possibly as much as 90 now. 90% or so of Americans say that we are a divided place. That hurts. I don't know what to do with that. I wanted to explore that division and how people experience it personally. So in this episode, I ask all 11 of my guests to explain exactly what that division looks like to them and where they think it came from.
It's easier to see party lines now. It's much easier to see by demeanor, pride, bumper stickers. It's very simple. These things that people need to just not need to, but want to display their pride and what they like. You can definitely tell who is who. You're wearing the MAGA hat because you're on Team MAGA. You're not Team America. You're Team MAGA.
I feel like the current partisan environment has actually taken away everybody's freedom to have their own opinion, right? Like whatever Trump says, I have to agree with that, because you're not allowed not to, honestly, all the way to, especially among people who are actual elected officials, but even among like your common everyday Republican, they're like, all right, well, I guess he did that. I'm going to find a way to convince myself that I agree with that. And that's going to be my talking point, right? I'm going to listen to Fox. Fox, you got to tell me why this makes sense and how I can get behind this, because I'm going to get lit up if I have to talk about this, right? But it's sad, right? Because it used to be, all right, well, here's what happened. And used to be able to be like, all right, well, I don't agree with everything this guy said. I don't agree with this point. And eventually, if that mounted up enough, right, there were enough of those things that I actually don't agree with. Okay, well, then this guy's has gone too far, right? I can't support this anymore. That has entirely gone away. There's no more of that. Same with the left. It's like the left isn't going to do a lot to, argue with old Biden policies. Whatever AOC says right now, whatever Bernie says right now, right? Whatever Mayor Pete says right now. I mean, it's all right. Or even worse, there's no Democrat that will agree with any individual policy that Trump has done, which again is just as bad,
Well, it's all tribes. I mean, I said, I'm in marketing advertising. We create tribes for our clients. Like we call out, we know exactly who our clients' core audience is. That's their tribe. We separate people in tribe, bro. I do in my agency as well. Like we have our messaging in our tribe. So that becomes part of people's identity. And people's identity is so, again, like I said, so their political identity is so core to who they are now that I think for a lot of people, there really is no reaching across the aisle without a lot of, for lack of a better term, like talk therapy or something. And that goes for people on the far right, as well as people on the far left. I mean, there's a lot of people on the far left I can't stand. There's just no talking to them, right? It's all or nothing, we tear everything down and we go to co-ops and stuff like that. Like, dude, that's not going to work either. You're not helping anything any more than somebody who thinks we should put everything in internment camps is helping, right?
I actually have a perfect example because I've said this. I called it the multiverse. Like, I feel like we're living in, my husband and I are big Marvel fans. So I feel like we are living in the multiverse and it's playing out in real time. And here's a perfect example. So kind of going along with the vaccine talk. So you have Robert Kennedy Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK. And who was a Democrat, right? Mm-hmm. His whole family is a full line of Democrats, right? So you have RFK and he has many views that I think most people agree with, but his biggest, claim to infamy is vaccines. Yeah. And so whenever he was going through the confirmation process, I was paying close attention to it. And what I found, so I go on Facebook and I see a clip shared from MSNBC or something like that, right? And 2 comments on top of each other. One calls him like a loony bin, like literally belonging to the loony bin. The other one is like, he's going to save America. And they're literally on top of each other. I mean, I screenshotted it because I was like, this is exactly what is the problem. We're living in 2 realities. This person thinks he's going to cause an apocalypse and like poison every child. And the next person thinks he's the savior. And they're so opposite. Like you can't, and how can you even meet in the middle on these extremes? It's impossible.
It feels like there are 2 Americas right now. And I would expand on that even as saying as maybe 2 realities, the lack of one objective reality, perhaps. So yeah, kind of seems like there's 2 worlds. I'm hoping that we're moving away from that, but it definitely does seem like there's a pretty tribal, demarcation between, 2 sides of the political spectrum at the moment.
This idea that the other team is bad and evil and actively wants to destroy our country. So you can't work with them, because if you do, you should be primaried and run out of office because you're colluding with Satan. I think we're in a very difficult spot when it comes to that right now. I think it has become in a lot of ways, again, thanks to the internet, a little too much like team sports, where I'm just going to root for my team no matter what they say or do, because that's my team. Then we just get into this position where like I feel the people I disagree with, like the truth just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. All that matters is winning, and winning comes at the expense of real people who suffer as a result of those decisions. So that's what bothers me, is that like the gamification through the internet, I think in a lot of ways, of important decisions in our lives without taking into account the consequences, or if that are taking into account the consequences and celebrating the fact that people are getting hurt because they're not on your team. That is what drives me absolutely crazy. So that's my biggest problem right now, is like we can't come to the most basic agreements on the most basic things and then work from there.
To use a football analogy, instead of becoming just like division opponents, we're becoming like rivals. We're becoming like arch rivals. So we're going from just like, hey, we are in a friendly scrimmage, or having team practices together, or even competing. We're competing in this political game, but hey, afterwards, good game. Shake your hand, high five.
Right.
Not going to try to injure you during the game or anything like that. But we're getting pushed to like a nemesis, an arch rival type thing, where like, oh, those guys are the worst, and we're going to go out there and we're gonna F them up because that's what we need to do. And that's what I would tell the politicians, is that the language that they're using is only pushing us to kind of go in that direction.
Thousand percent the media. They continuously make things emotional that don't need to be emotional. They find angles to things to make it more racist than it is. Really just playing on fear, anxiety, emotions. And there's it's both sides, right? Because they both do it. But I think when it comes to that race, that you brought up, definitely the left-leaning news just completely lean into the race, the race debate, the immigration, the LGBTQ, like all of those, marginalized communities, they really play into them and make it a war that doesn't need to exist. But then the right doesn't, do themselves any favors, because, they call every LGBTQ member a pedophile, or, something that, again, is just like so extreme that if you've only heard one side, you'll believe that the country is burning every day.
And it's been this way since I was a kid. It's not just with immigration, it's everything. It's sensationalization, I guess, if that's a word, of a small pocket of things that are going on that are devastating, that do happen. But it's continually talking about it and continually feeding into it, that continues to drive it. Things that should last minimally long, a minimal amount of time, are just drug on forever. And people get more and more angry, more and more frustrated, more and more tired of it.
The profit structure of corporate media, I think, is at least incentivized to be sort of create like reactionary news that to get clicks, to get attention, to get headlines. So I think a lot of things get either blown out of proportion or framed in a sort of black and white way, or pitched to you for sort of to stimulate, not stimulate, but to create outrage. Rage bait, I guess, is a term I've heard. So yeah, and I think a lot of people don't have the best media training or media literacy in this country, and I think a lot of news is taken at face value, and certainly you could argue against that with all the kind of like backlash to media and everything being called fake news, and but I don't think it's necessarily a critical response to mainstream media. It's more of a like, oh, you're not saying what I like, I want to hear, so you must be false. Maybe not so much of a critical, dissection of what's being presented to you or how. So I think people are very susceptible to, being either radicalized maybe, or just their perspective being molded and framed deeply by these very polarized media sources.
I think in a lot of ways, social media has been a curse. It's been the worst thing at the worst time for our world in a lot of ways. It's done a lot of amazing things too, but I think, to a large extent, it's really damaged our world. And I think it goes to what we're talking about here, which is this idea that technology has not made our life what we thought it would, right? We're not working less. We're not working easier. We don't feel more connected to people around us. We don't feel like things are getting better. In fact, we look at our world and the things that are important to us, whether it's our politics, things like healthcare, the economy, climate, you name it. These things not only seem to be getting worse, in my opinion, every day, and I think a lot of other people feel that way, but there also does not seem to be any way for us to meaningfully change them. We look at the way government works, whether it's our own country or other countries or the international order, and it just seems like things are happening that are out of our control and that kind of happen to us. And it's a broken system that is unfair and we have no power over. And I think that causes a feeling of real helplessness in a lot of people. We start looking for easy answers and solutions and superstition and myth and these things that we think, whether it's, who is our enemy? How are we going to attack that enemy? And how are we going to make ourselves feel better vicariously by attacking that person, that enemy online? And we turn that other into a scapegoat, right? It truly is like a scapegoating of someone. And I am going to go online and I'm going to rip that person to shreds and I'm going to feel good about it because I have a community of people who do connect with me and they are cheering me on, right? And I am rewarded by this slot machine system on social media where I get these dopamine hits from the cheers or even from the hate. When I see the reaction, at least I'm feeling something, right? Which gets me posting more and keeps me posting more and keeps me posting more. And the crazier I get, the more reaction I get. And before you know it, I feel like that drives people into a really dark place. And like I say, I don't think they will look at themselves outside of the internet or outside of social media and see themselves as bad people or uncaring people or unempathetic people. But they and millions of people like them, and I've had to fight myself to keep from getting sucked into this environment. I do get sucked into this environment just like everybody else. So again, not trying to say I'm like somehow above it because I'm part of it. They are contributing to this problem that just seems like a tornado that has no end to it, right? So I feel like that social medification, I don't have an answer for it, honestly. It's an addictive drug. I think that we're seeing that is ruining lives from the youngest teenagers who want to kill themselves because they're bullied to death or are taught to shame their bodies or think in terms of pornography or you name it, to the boomers who have completely just bought into like whatever rumor is being spread, whether it's left, right, or center on Facebook that day.
Whatever drives engagement. So engagement is ad revenue and anything to bring in the viewers. So
the part of the reason might just be like the evolution of technology, right?
Yeah.
It's allowed us to connect in very shallow ways, but it's also kind of encouraged us to disconnect in the deeper things. And that kind of superficial connection I think it's dangerous. People, it's easier to view people as inhuman when you disconnect those deeper connections. And I think that's kind of the place that we're in. We're very, very, it's very easy for someone to dehumanize another person just because they believe a little bit differently. And, I think we're seeing the results of that all over the world. You're given, you're giving the rats cocaine, and sometimes, most rats don't need cocaine.
So it really is two Americas that we're living in right now. And unfortunately, people are not really open to hearing that the other side has legitimate problems, because then that means that, maybe their personally long-held beliefs are wrong, which means maybe they're wrong, but they can't be wrong because they're a good person. So really, it's this other person who's wrong. So much of this is cult-like behavior to where people have invested so much of their mental and emotional energy and lost so many or damaged so many relationships that at this point, they cannot be wrong. Everybody else has to be wrong because they've already sunk so much in this. It's sunk cost fallacy psychologically, right? And I think that's where, unfortunately, a lot of people are. I'm not saying, everybody who's MAGA is this, or, everybody who's with Bernie is like this. But I'm just saying, like, as humans, we have gotten so far into our own bubbles, and we've gotten so far into these echo chambers that we are just reinforcing to ourselves that our core beliefs and our identity are right and correct, and everybody else who thinks differently is wrong, and they need to be dealt with.
I think people are being manipulated by politicians for the politicians' financial. This is a hard one because it also seems so obvious, I guess, from my point of view about what's going on the other side. But I feel like a lot of people are just being duped into believing things that aren't true. And then when that's brought up to them, I think there's either two ways you can go. You could admit that you were duped and work on mending and changing your ways, or you can double down and just dig your heels in. And it feels like there's a lot of hills being dug in when it's brought to them that they potentially have been used. I don't know. There's probably a more elegant way to put this. No one likes to feel like they've been had.
So that might be your whole community. So rejecting any part of that, you might lose everything. You might be shunned, growing up, or not growing up, but living in Brooklyn, I've lived near and around various Orthodox communities, and heard stories of people who've basically turned away or turned down or left basically for various reasons, and heard about how there's actually a documentary about this that follows 3 people that leave the community for different reasons, and their journey of starting a new life, but also the consequences, the fallout of questioning or walking away from that community.
I think there's a lot of root causes, and I haven't thought about what all of them were. But I think the racism piece is very real. It was this loss of power.
Okay.
Of that sort of, there's been tons and tons of stuff done around how at a certain point there's going to be more like sort of brown or mixed people in the United States than white people. The gaps were closing, right? And it's that fear of not having that seat of power anymore, of not being that majority anymore, of the loss of power. And that actually, to me, really struck a chord. It's that fear of losing something, losing whatever perceived or real sort of power you may have had based on race.
So when asked, about 80% of Americans say that the nation is divided. And as we were talking about a minute ago, pretty reasonable to think that number might even be higher now. When I started talking to all these folks, I kind of had a sense that maybe if I asked about this divide, people would say, well, David, it's a little bit overblown. I don't really see that in my personal life. It's something you see on TV, something you see on social media, but it's not really in, my day to day. Clearly not the case. Pretty clear that every single person that I spoke with has a strong sense that the nation is divided in some way or another. And that divide may look a little bit different for everybody, but it's very clearly there. Likewise, pretty clear that nearly all of them have a strong sense that the media is a contributing factor. And I often think that blaming the media for our problems is a little bit of a cop-out, but maybe not in this case. All of them had a strong sense that the media was a contributing factor. I don't think anybody would have said that it's the only factor. And you could see that there were some folks who had other takes as well, things concerning identity and race and things like that. But certainly they all seem to think that the media plays a strong role. So we're going to unpack that more in later episodes as well. In any case, really heavy stuff. Really thoughtful perspective out of everybody, but some heavy stuff that we're going to have to keep on addressing and unpacking as we go. All right, I'm David Combs. This is Nobody's Side. See you next time.